There are moments when something inside you goes strangely quiet, not peaceful, not calm. Just quiet in a way that feels unfamiliar. You wake up, reach for your phone before your eyes have fully adjusted to the light, and within minutes you're already somewhere else. A headline tells you what to fear. A video tells you what matters. A stranger you've never met tells you how to think about politics, happiness, success, love, your own body, and even your future. Before breakfast, your emotions have traveled through half the planet, reacting to events you'll never experience firsthand. And somehow, by the end of the day, you're exhausted. Not because your body worked harder than generations before you. Quite the opposite. Most of us spend our days sitting, scrolling, clicking, responding. Yet something feels constantly under attack. Have you ever wondered why? It doesn't feel like someone is forcing you. No one is standing over your shoulder. No government official is knocking on your door, demanding your obedience. No soldier is marching through your neighborhood. You feel free, and yet, your attention rarely belongs entirely to you. That contradiction may be one of the defining experiences of our time. For thousands of years, power was easy to recognize. Kings displayed it with crowns. Empires demonstrated it with armies. Dictators ruled through fear because fear was visible. When people lost their freedom, they usually knew it. Today, power has become quieter. It arrives as convenience, as personalization, as endless choice, as the comforting illusion that every decision began inside your own mind. This isn't a story about secret organizations controlling the world from dark rooms. Reality is far more fascinating and far more unsettling than conspiracy. The greatest influence over human behavior has almost never depended on force alone. It has depended on understanding people better than they understand themselves. That idea has echoed throughout history in different forms, long before computers ever existed. Ancient rulers understood something fundamental about human beings. Most people don't move because they're ordered to. They move because they believe. The Egyptian pyramids weren't built simply through violence. Entire civilizations organized themselves around shared stories about gods, destiny, death, and eternity. Those stories gave millions of people a common reality. The same pattern appeared across empires. Rome didn't survive for centuries because every citizen feared a sword every waking moment. It survived because people accepted institutions, traditions, rituals, and identities larger than themselves. Human beings have always lived inside stories. Money is a story. Nations are stories. Religions are stories. Corporations are stories. Even the idea of success changes, depending on which story your culture tells. None of these are fake simply because they're shared beliefs. They become real precisely because millions of people act as though they are real. That may be humanity's greatest strength. It may also be our greatest vulnerability. Because if stories shape reality, who gets to tell the stories? Thousands of years ago, information traveled as slowly as horses could run. A rumor could take months to cross continents. Ideas competed with distance. Today, ideas compete with milliseconds. Every swipe becomes information. Every pause becomes data. Every hesitation tells someone, or something, a little more about who you are. Not necessarily your name. Something much deeper. Your patterns, your impulses, your fears. Psychologists have known for decades that people often explain their choices after they've already made them. The conscious mind likes to think of itself as the author of every decision. But much of what guides behavior begins below awareness. You don't suddenly crave certain foods by accident. You don't instantly trust every familiar face because you've carefully evaluated each one. Your brain is constantly making predictions, filtering reality, filling in gaps, protecting habits that kept you alive long before modern civilization existed. For most of human history, those shortcuts were incredibly useful. If your ancestors heard rustling in the bushes, assuming danger was smarter than waiting for proof. If everyone around them believed something, following the group often increased their chances of survival. Belonging wasn't just emotional, it was biological. The human nervous system evolved inside tribes. Being excluded once could mean death. That ancient wiring still lives inside us. Only now, the tribe fits inside a screen. Every notification whispers the same ancient promise. You belong. Every like feels like recognition. Every disagreement can feel strangely personal. Even when it comes from someone thousands of miles away. Your brain often reacts as though your social survival is on the line. And that's where modern technology intersects with something far older than technology itself. The battle isn't between humans and machines. It's between awareness and automatic behavior. Neuroscientists often describe the brain as an energy-saving machine. Conscious thinking is expensive. Habits are efficient. Predictable routines conserve mental effort. That's wonderful when you're learning to drive a car. Less wonderful when your attention becomes someone else's business model. Most people believe distraction is simply a lack of discipline. But distraction is also an environment. If thousands of engineers spend years discovering exactly what keeps human attention engaged for one more second, and then another, are you really competing against your own willpower? Or are you competing against an entire industry devoted to understanding the architecture of your mind? That's a very different question. And perhaps a more honest one. History has entered a new chapter. Not because human nature has changed, but because our oldest instincts have encountered technologies capable of responding to them instantly. The philosopher Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that the quality of life depends on the quality of attention. Long before smartphones, he recognized that whatever captures the mind gradually shapes the person. He couldn't have imagined recommendation algorithms, yet he understood temptation. He understood distraction. He understood the quiet erosion of self-command. Centuries later, Friedrich Nietzsche warned that people often become whoever speaks the loudest inside them. He wasn't referring to digital feeds, but his insight feels strangely modern. Every culture fills the inner world with competing voices. Some are inherited, some are chosen. Many simply arrive without invitation. Carl Jung explored another layer entirely. He believed that much of what directs human behavior remains hidden beneath consciousness. The parts we refuse to examine don't disappear. They simply influence us from the shadows. What if that idea now extends beyond the individual? What if our collective shadow has become externalized through technology that reflects our impulses back to us? Anger receives attention. Attention becomes engagement. Engagement becomes profit. Profit encourages more anger. Without anyone consciously planning the entire cycle, millions of people become participants in a system that amplifies whatever captures the human nervous system most effectively. No dictator needs to command it. No empire needs to enforce it. The machinery continues because every participant believes they're acting freely. That possibility is uncomfortable, not because it means freedom has vanished, but because it suggests freedom requires something deeper than simply having choices. Perhaps real freedom begins with noticing why one choice feels irresistible, while another barely enters awareness. And that question becomes even more urgent as artificial intelligence grows more capable, not merely of answering questions, but of predicting them before we ask. That possibility unsettles us because it overturns one of our favorite assumptions, that we are the primary authors of our own thoughts. We like to picture the mind as a private sanctuary, sealed off from the outside world, where decisions are made through reason and careful reflection. It feels comforting to believe that who we are is something permanent, something untouched by the endless stream of information surrounding us. But the mind has never worked that way. Long before the first smartphone lit up a bedroom at midnight, the human brain was already a social organ. It evolved not in isolation, but in constant conversation with other minds. Every language you speak, every symbol you recognize, every belief you've inherited, was shaped by countless people you'll never meet. In a sense, your consciousness has always been collaborative. The difference is that the collaborators have changed. For most of history, your worldview was shaped by family, neighbors, teachers, local traditions, and the rhythms of the place where you lived. The number of voices competing for your attention was relatively small. Even when cultures collided, change happened slowly enough that generations had time to adapt. Today, your mind is exposed to more ideas before lunch than many of your ancestors encountered in an entire year. Some of those ideas are brilliant, others are manipulative. Most are simply trying to survive in an economy where attention has become one of the most valuable resources on Earth. This creates a strange paradox. Information has never been more accessible. Wisdom has rarely felt so difficult to find. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to mistake familiarity for truth? Psychologists call this the illusion of truth effect. The more often we encounter an idea, the more believable it begins to feel, even if we've never examined the evidence behind it. Our brains aren't being irrational, they're being efficient. Repeated information signals safety. Familiarity reduces uncertainty. The brain interprets that reduction almost like a shortcut to confidence. In earlier centuries, that shortcut often served us well. Repeated experiences usually reflected stable realities. Seasons returned. Rivers followed the same paths. Elders passed down knowledge tested over generations. Now repetition is engineered. A headline appears on one platform, it echoes across another. Friends unknowingly repeat it. Creators react to it. Memes reshape it. Soon the idea feels less like information and more like common sense. Not because it's true, because it's everywhere. This is one of the quietest transformations of modern life. Reality increasingly competes with repetition. And the human brain wasn't designed to distinguish between the two with perfect accuracy. There's another twist that makes this even more fascinating. Your brain doesn't simply receive information. It predicts it. Modern neuroscience suggests perception is less like watching a movie and more like your brain continuously guessing what's about to happen, updating those guesses as new evidence arrives. You don't passively observe reality, you actively construct it. Think about walking through your own neighborhood. You barely notice the streets anymore. Your mind fills in the familiar details automatically. Now travel somewhere completely new. Suddenly every sound feels sharper. Every building attracts attention. Time itself seems to slow down. Nothing changed about the speed of the clock. Your awareness changed. Novelty interrupted prediction. For a brief moment, you were fully present. That raises an uncomfortable possibility. If our brains are constantly predicting reality, who benefits from influencing those predictions? The answer isn't as simple as pointing toward one company, one government, or one ideology. Influence has become decentralized. Millions of people participate without realizing it. Every share, every repost, every emotional reaction, every argument that keeps an idea circulating for another day. Human beings have become both the audience and the broadcasters. We're not merely consuming culture anymore, we're manufacturing it together in real time. And because outrage travels faster than nuance, the emotional climate of entire societies can shift almost overnight. This isn't new. History offers countless examples of crowds swept away by powerful narratives. The French Revolution transformed ordinary citizens into revolutionaries almost seemingly overnight. Financial bubbles have convinced intelligent people that impossible prices would rise forever. Mass movements have inspired extraordinary acts of courage and horrifying acts of cruelty, using the same psychological mechanisms. The crowd doesn't erase individual intelligence, it amplifies collective emotion. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard worried that individuals disappear when they stop relating directly to truth, and instead relate primarily to what everyone else believes. His concern feels remarkably modern, not because technology created conformity, because technology accelerates it. You can now witness millions of opinions simultaneously. Ironically, that abundance often narrows thought instead of expanding it. When every issue demands an immediate reaction, contemplation begins to feel like weakness. Silence starts looking suspicious. Certainty becomes fashionable. Doubt becomes uncomfortable. But genuine understanding almost always begins with uncertainty. Children ask endless questions because they don't yet mistake confidence for knowledge. Somewhere along the way, many adults reverse the equation. We become more interested in appearing certain than remaining curious. Perhaps that's one of the greatest psychological costs of the digital age. Curiosity requires patience. Algorithms reward immediacy. Reflection takes time. Attention economies monetize interruption. These incentives quietly reshape not only what we consume but how we think. Have you ever caught yourself reaching for your phone without remembering why? That tiny moment reveals something profound. The action often begins before conscious intention catches up. Behavioral scientists describe habits as loops. A cue appears, a routine follows, a reward reinforces the cycle. Repeat the process enough times, and behavior becomes automatic. Now imagine billions of people carrying devices capable of delivering personalized rewards hundreds of times each day. Not by accident, by design. The remarkable thing isn't that people become distracted. It's that anyone manages to remain attentive at all. Yet here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The greatest threat may not be distraction itself. It may be forgetting that you're distracted, because awareness changes everything. The moment you notice your own mind wandering, you've already stepped outside the automatic process. You're observing it rather than being carried by it. This simple shift fascinated philosophers across cultures. In Buddhist traditions, mindfulness wasn't about escaping the world. It was about seeing clearly. Seeing desire arise, seeing fear appear, seeing anger form before it became action. Not suppressing experience, witnessing it. The Stoics practiced something surprisingly similar. They understood that events themselves rarely imprison us. Our interpretations often do. Between what happens and how we respond, exists a space so small we usually overlook it. Yet that space contains the possibility of freedom, not absolute freedom. Human beings will always be shaped by biology, culture, memory, and circumstance. But perhaps enough freedom to decide which voices deserve a permanent place inside the mind. That decision may become the defining skill of this century. Artificial intelligence grows more sophisticated each year. It learns patterns faster than any individual human could. It predicts preferences, generates conversation, creates images, writes stories. Soon it may know your habits almost as well as you do. Many people fear that such systems will become more intelligent than humans. Perhaps the more important question is different. Will humans remain deeply acquainted with themselves? Because technology can only exploit the parts of us that remain unconscious. It cannot manipulate awareness as easily as it can manipulate impulse. That distinction changes the conversation entirely. The future may not be determined by who possesses the most advanced machines. It may belong to those who preserve the increasingly rare ability to pause before reacting, to notice before believing, and to ask one more question before accepting the first answer that feels emotionally satisfying. When was the last time you spent an entire hour without anything trying to persuade you? No advertisements, no notifications, no recommendations, no carefully optimized feed, anticipating your next emotion. Just your own thoughts. For many people, that experience has become surprisingly unfamiliar, maybe even uncomfortable. And perhaps that's exactly why it's worth rediscovering. That discomfort tells us something most people never stop to consider. Silence is not empty. It only feels empty because we've grown accustomed to constant occupation. The moment external noise fades, something else becomes audible. Thoughts you postponed. Questions you buried beneath productivity. Emotions that never disappeared, only waited patiently beneath the next notification. Modern life gives us countless ways to escape ourselves. Work a little longer. Watch one more episode, refreeze the feed one more time. Scroll until you're too tired to think. None of these are inherently harmful. Entertainment has always been part of being human. Stories have always comforted us. Communities have always shaped us. The danger begins when distraction becomes our default relationship with reality. Because whatever we consistently avoid eventually begins directing us from the shadows. Carl Jung believed that the parts of ourselves we refuse to confront don't simply vanish. They become part of what he called the shadow, influencing our decisions in ways we rarely recognize. We tell ourselves we're making rational choices, while old fears, insecurities, and unmet needs quietly steer the wheel. Technology didn't invent the shadow, it simply gave it a microphone. Think about how quickly an ordinary disagreement can become a personal battle online. A stranger questions your opinion. Within seconds, your heartbeat changes, your muscles tighten, your attention narrows. The conversation no longer feels like an exchange of ideas. It feels like a threat to your identity. From a neuroscientific perspective, this isn't surprising. The brain often treats attacks on deeply held beliefs similarly to physical danger. Regions involved in emotional processing become highly active, while the slower, more reflective parts of the brain struggle to keep pace. That's why changing someone's mind through humiliation almost never works. When identity feels cornered, curiosity leaves the room. The tragedy is that this pattern doesn't only happen on social media. It follows us into families, friendships, relationships, politics, workplaces. We increasingly mistake defending our identity for discovering the truth. But identity was never meant to be a prison. It was meant to be a starting point. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche challenged people to become who they truly are, not by clinging to inherited beliefs, but by continually questioning them. His concern wasn't simply about authority. It was about complacency. A life lived entirely according to borrowed values eventually stops feeling like your own. That question has become even more urgent today. How many of your opinions arrived through careful reflection? And how many simply arrived because they fit the environment around you? It's an uncomfortable question because there isn't a clean answer. Every human being absorbs ideas from the world. No one begins from zero. The goal isn't to become perfectly independent. That's impossible. The goal is to become conscious of the influences already shaping you. Awareness doesn't eliminate influence. It transforms your relationship with it. Perhaps that's the quiet thread connecting so many philosophical traditions across history. Socrates insisted that the unexamined life isn't truly lived. The Stoics practiced daily self-reflection. Buddhist monks observed the movement of thought without immediately identifying with it. Different cultures, different languages, different centuries. Yet they all pointed toward the same astonishing possibility. You are not every thought that enters your mind. You are the awareness capable of noticing those thoughts. That distinction may sound subtle. It changes everything. Once you recognize that thoughts can be observed, they lose some of their authority. Fear becomes an experience rather than an identity. Anger becomes a passing state rather than a permanent worldview. Desire becomes something to examine instead of something to obey. This doesn't make life easier overnight. It makes it more honest. And honesty has become strangely radical. We live in an era where appearances often matter more than reality. Success is curated. Happiness is edited. Confidence is filtered. Even authenticity has become a performance in many corners of the internet. People feel increasing pressure to become brands rather than human beings. To optimize every moment, monetize every hobby, memorize every achievement, package every experience into something shareable. Yet the deepest parts of life refuse to fit into that system. Love cannot be reduced to metrics. Grief doesn't care about algorithms. Wonder arrives without asking whether anyone will click like. The most meaningful experiences often happen when no one else is watching. Maybe that's why so many people feel an invisible loneliness. Despite being more connected than any generation before them, connection and exposure are not the same thing. Knowing thousands of people exist doesn't mean feeling understood. Receiving attention doesn't necessarily satisfy the longing to be seen. There is an ancient hunger beneath all of this, the desire to matter, to belong. To know that our lives mean something beyond the endless cycle of consumption and production. For centuries, civilizations answered those questions through religion, tradition, shared rituals, and close communities. Many of those structures have weakened. In their place, markets and media increasingly compete to provide identity. Not because they are evil, because where meaning becomes scarce, substitutes become valuable. If someone can convince you that fulfillment is always one purchase, one promotion, one trend, or one perfect version of yourself away, you'll keep chasing. The horizon keeps moving. The pursuit never ends. This is why some of the most outwardly successful people still describe an inexplicable emptiness. Achievement can satisfy ambition. It cannot automatically satisfy existence. Viktor Frankl, reflecting on humanity after surviving unimaginable suffering, argued that people can endure extraordinary hardship when they possess a sense of meaning. Without meaning, even comfort begins to feel unbearable. Perhaps that's one of the defining paradoxes of modern civilization. We've solved countless external problems while creating new internal ones. We can communicate instantly across oceans, yet struggle to have uninterrupted conversations with the people sitting beside us. We have access to nearly all recorded human knowledge, yet often feel overwhelmed by information instead of transformed by wisdom. We could customize nearly every aspect of our lives, yet many people quietly wonder whether they're choosing freely, or simply selecting from options someone else arranged. That question brings us back to where this journey began. Power, not the power of kings, not the power of armies. The quieter power that shapes attention, habits, emotions, and ultimately identity. History suggests that every era develops its own methods of influence. The printing press transformed religion. Radio transformed politics. Television transformed culture. Artificial intelligence may transform something even deeper. Not merely what we know, but how we come to know ourselves. That possibility should not inspire panic. It should inspire responsibility. Technology is a tool. Like every tool in history, its consequences depend partly on the hands that wield it and partly on the minds that receive it. The question isn't whether innovation will continue. It will. The question is whether our capacity for self-awareness can grow alongside it. Because no algorithm can replace genuine introspection. No recommendation system can tell you what gives your life meaning. No machine, no matter how sophisticated, can experience your conscience for you. That remains profoundly human. Maybe that's the real frontier of the 21st century. Not artificial intelligence, authentic awareness. The ability to recognize when your attention has been captured, to notice when fear is being sold as certainty,